Now let's begin. The desert sun beat down on Yuma, proving ground with the kind of relentless heat that turned ordinary men into puddles of exhaustion. But the 40 operators assembled on the training mat weren't ordinary men. They were Navy SEALs, some of the most elite warriors the United States military had ever produced, and right now they were learning how to kill with their bare hands. Jeremiah Quinn circled the mat like a predator, his 6'2" frame still carrying the lethal grace of a man half his 47 years. 22 years he'd been doing this, teaching the unteachable, preparing men for the kind of combat that happened when everything else failed. His hands bore the scars of 10,000 training sessions, and his knuckles had been broken and reset so many times the x-rays looked like abstract art. Pain is information, he told the class, watching as two operators grappled in the center of the mat. Your body's telling you something's wrong. But here's the thing. He stepped forward and separated them with a single fluid motion. You don't have to listen. The younger SEAL, a kid named Sean Robinson from Texas, was breathing hard. His opponent, a veteran named Jan Watson, barely looked winded. Robinson, you're telegraphing every move 3 seconds before you make it, Jeremiah said, his voice carrying that particular edge that made men stand straighter. In a real fight, you'd be dead. Watson, demonstrate. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Watson moved like liquid mercury, and Robinson hit the mat hard enough to knock the wind out of him. See that? Economy of motion. Watson didn't waste a single movement. Every action served a purpose. Jeremiah helped Robinson to his feet. Again, and this time, think like a snake. Be still until you strike. The afternoon wore on, temperature pushing past 110 degrees. Most of the operators had trained in hellish conditions before. Bud/S, the Navy SEAL training program, made sure of that, but Jeremiah's courses were different. He didn't just teach techniques. He taught a philosophy of violence that went deeper than muscle memory. During a water break, Jan Watson approached him. Watson was 32, a senior chief with 3 deployments under his belt. Chief Quinn, permission to speak freely? Always. That move you showed us yesterday, the counter to the rear naked choke, I've never seen anything like it. Where'd you learn that? Jeremiah took a long pull from his water bottle. Okinawa, 2007. Old master named Takashi. Spent 6 months training with him between deployments. He told me the secret to defeating any hold isn't strength. It's understanding leverage and timing better than your opponent. You've been all over, haven't you? 22 years, Watson. Trained with Systema experts in Russia, Krav Maga specialists in Israel, Muay Thai champions in Thailand. Even spent time with some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts who made me question everything I thought I knew about ground fighting. He smiled, a rare expression. The day you think you know everything is the day you become useless to these men. His phone buzzed. Jeremiah glanced at it. A text from his ex-wife, Mary. He frowned. They'd been divorced for 8 years, and their communication had dwindled to occasional updates about their son, Derek. The text read, Derek coming to see you. Don't ask questions. Something wrong, Chief? Watson asked. Not sure yet. Jeremiah pocketed the phone. All right, break's over. Let's talk about fighting multiple opponents. The class reformed. Jeremiah spent the next hour demonstrating how to control space, how to position yourself so you never faced more than one attacker at a time, how to identify the most dangerous threat and neutralize them first. These weren't theoretical lessons. Every technique came from real experience, from operations in Fallujah and Helmand province where Jeremiah had fought his way through situations that would have killed lesser men. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Jeremiah dismissed the class. The operators dispersed toward their barracks, muscles aching, minds processing the day's lessons. Jeremiah headed to his office, a sparse room in the training facility that held little more than a desk, a filing cabinet, and a wall covered in photographs. The photos told the story of his life. A younger Jeremiah in BUD/S, graduating with Class 234. His first deployment photo, squad posed in front of a helicopter in Afghanistan. His wedding day with Mary, both of them impossibly young. He was 26, she was 24. Derek is a baby, then a toddler, then a gap of several years where the photos stopped. That gap represented the hardest years. The years when deployment stretched longer and came more frequently. When Mary's calls became shorter, colder. When he'd come home to a house that felt less like home each time. Derek had been 8 when Jeremiah had finally admitted the truth. He was a better warrior than husband. The divorce had been ugly. Not because of infidelity or abuse, but because of absence. Mary had needed a partner, and Jeremiah had been overseas, training foreign forces or hunting high-value targets in countries whose names were still classified. She'd asked him to choose, the Navy or his family. He'd chosen wrong. After the divorce, he'd left the teams and taken this training position, thinking it would give him more stability, more time with Derek. But Mary had moved to Phoenix with their son, and the distance, both physical and emotional, had only grown. Derek saw him during holidays and summer breaks, their relationship becoming something formal and uncomfortable, like two acquaintances who shared DNA. Now, Derek was 19, a sophomore at Arizona State University, studying engineering. They texted occasionally, called even less. Jeremiah had tried to rebuild what they'd lost, but you couldn't turn back time. You couldn't reclaim the soccer games you'd missed, the school plays you weren't there for, the nights when a boy needed his father and got an empty chair instead. A knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Come in." Ira Baird, one of his assistant instructors, stepped inside. Baird was a retired SEAL Master Chief, 51 years old, with a face that looked like worn leather and eyes that had seen too much. "Chief, there's someone here to see you. Says he's your son." Jeremiah's stomach tightened. "Send him in." Baird hesitated. "Chief, you should know." But Derek was already pushing past Baird into the office, and the sight of him made Jeremiah's blood freeze. His son's face was barely recognizable. The left side was swollen and purple, his eye nearly shut. His nose was definitely broken, bent at an unnatural angle. His lower lip was split, and when Derek tried to speak, Jeremiah could see at least 2 teeth were missing. Derek's right arm hung in an improvised sling, and the way he moved suggested broken ribs. "Jesus Christ," Jeremiah breathed, moving around the desk. "Derek, I'm sorry, Dad." Derek's voice was thick, slurred. "I didn't know where else to go." Jeremiah guided him to a chair, his mind already cataloging injuries. This wasn't a simple beating. This was systematic, professional. Someone had taken their time. "Baird, get the medic." Now. Baird was already moving. Jeremiah knelt in front of his son, carefully examining the damage. "Who did this?" Derek wouldn't meet his eyes. "I can't tell you." "Derek, I can't, Dad. They said they'd kill me if I told you." "Derek's good." I was wet with tears. "They said they'd make it look like an accident." A cold fury settled over Jeremiah, the kind of emotion he'd learned to control during 22 years of combat. It was a dangerous thing, rage like that. It made you sloppy, but properly channeled, it made you unstoppable. "Tell me everything," Jeremiah said quietly. "Start from the beginning." Derek swallowed hard, wincing at the pain. "It's Kurt, Mom's husband." Jeremiah knew Mary had remarried 3 years ago. Kurt King, a Phoenix Police Department sergeant. They'd never met. Jeremiah had been deployed during the wedding, and by the time he got back, Mary had made it clear he wasn't welcome in her new life. "What about him?" He's been getting worse." At first it was just comments, about how I was weak, how I wasn't a real man like him. Mom tried to defend me, but that just made it worse. Then it escalated. Shoving. Occasional slaps. Always where it wouldn't show. Jeremiah's hands clenched into fists. "Last month, I told him I'd had enough. That I was moving out. He said if I left, he'd make sure Mom paid the price. He said his friends on the force would make her life hell. Parking tickets, harassment, worse. So I stayed." Derek's voice cracked. "But yesterday, I told him I was coming to see you for the weekend. He said no son of his was going to visit some washed-up SEAL who couldn't even keep his family together. I'm not his son," I told him. That's when Derek gestured to his face. "He beat me for 3 hours, Dad, in the garage where Mom couldn't hear. He used a phone book so it wouldn't leave marks in some places, but then he got angry, really angry, and he didn't stop." The medic arrived, a corpsman named Harvey Potts who'd served with Jeremiah in Ramadi. Potts took one look at Derek and immediately began his assessment. 3 broken ribs, broken nose, possible orbital fracture, Potts said after a few minutes. His right arm has multiple fractures. Looks like someone stomped on it. You need the hospital, Chief. No hospitals, Derek said quickly. Kurt's got friends everywhere. He'll know. He said if I went to the cops or a hospital, his friend would take care of it. They'd say I attacked him, that it was self-defense. He's a cop, Jeremiah said, understanding dawning. He's got the system on his side. Derek nodded. His whole precinct's corrupt, Dad. They cover for each other. There was this case last year. A guy accused Kurt of planting evidence. Guy ended up dead in a jail cell. They ruled it suicide, but everyone knew. Jeremiah stood, his mind racing through options. Traditional justice wouldn't work here. Kurt had insulated himself with a network of corrupt cops who'd protect him. Going through official channels would mean paperwork, investigations, and in the meantime, Mary would be vulnerable and Derek would be a target. No, this required a different approach. Potts, stabilize him. Set that nose, splint the arm. I want him comfortable. Chief, he really should. I know what he should do. Right now. I'm telling you what he's going to do. Understood. Potts nodded. He'd served under Jeremiah long enough to recognize that tone. While Potts worked, Jeremiah stepped outside. The evening air was cooler now, the desert temperature dropping rapidly. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Ira Baird was standing nearby, waiting. You heard? Jeremiah asked. Enough. I need a secure line. Scrambled. And I need you to gather the current class. All 40 of them. Tell them it's urgent. Baird studied him for a long moment. Chief, whatever you're planning. I trained these men to fight evil, Baird. To protect the innocent. To be warriors who stand between the wolves and the sheep. Jeremiah's voice was steel. Right now, my son is lying in there because a corrupt cop thought he could brutalize a kid without consequences. That cop has 27 other officers protecting him. 28 in the precinct, you said? Yeah. Baird's weathered face split into a grim smile. Well, we've got 40 SEALs. Sounds like good odds to me. This isn't official, Baird. This can't come back on the Navy. No footage, no witnesses, no mercy. Anyone who participates does so of their own accord, and they accept the risks. These men would follow you into hell, Chief. You know that. This might be worse than hell. We're going after cops. Corrupt cops, Baird corrected. There's a difference. Give me 30 minutes. While Baird went to gather the class, Jeremiah made several calls. First to an old friend who ran a private medical practice in Yuma, someone who knew how to treat injuries without filing reports. Then to a contact in Phoenix who could provide intelligence on Kurt King and his precinct. Finally, to a lawyer, not for legal advice, but for information on property records, shift schedules, and the kind of data that was technically public but hard to access. By the time he returned to his office, Derek was bandaged and medicated. His arm was in a proper splint, his ribs wrapped. Potts had done good work. How do you feel? Jeremiah asked. Like I got hit by a truck. Derek's words were clearer now, the painkillers taking effect. Dad, what are you going to do? Jeremiah pulled up a chair and sat across from his son. For the first time in years, he really looked at Derek, not as a reminder of his failed marriage, but as a young man who'd survived something horrific and had nowhere else to turn. I'm going to make this right, Jeremiah said. Kurt hurt you because he thought he could get away with it. Because he thought I was too far away, too disconnected, too bound by rules to do anything about it. He was wrong. You can't fight the whole police department. I'm not going to fight them. I'm going to dismantle them. Jeremiah leaned forward. Derek, I haven't been the father you deserved. I know that. I chose my career over my family, and that's something I'll have to live with. But I want you to understand something. A warrior isn't defined by the fights he takes on. He's defined by what he's willing to fight for. And right now, I'm willing to fight for you. Derek's good. I filled with tears. I just wanted to stop. It will. I promise you that. A knock on the door. Baird's voice. Chief, they're assembled. Jeremiah stood. Rest. I'll be back soon. The training facility's main briefing room could hold 100 people, but tonight it held 40. 40 Navy SEALs, ranging in age from 23 to 38, representing years of combined combat experience. They stood in loose formation, alert and curious. Jeremiah walked to the front of the room, and every conversation stopped. "Most of you have families," he began, his voice carrying to the back of the room. "Parents, siblings, children. Some of you have been through divorces. You understand what it's like to miss birthdays, to hear about your kids' accomplishments through a phone call, to wonder if you're doing more harm than good by staying in the teams." Heads nodded. These men understood sacrifice. "My son is 19 years old. He's a good kid, smart, kind, wants to be an engineer. I haven't been the father he needed, but that doesn't change the fact that he's my son. And 3 hours ago, he showed up at my office after being beaten nearly to death by his stepfather." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. 40 sets of eyes locked onto Jeremiah with laser focus. His stepfather is a Phoenix Police Department sergeant named Kurt King. King has been systematically abusing my son for months, escalating from psychological torture to physical violence. Yesterday, he beat Derek with a phone book in his fist for 3 hours, breaking bones and destroying his face. He did this because Derek wanted to visit me. Jan Watson spoke up. "Why didn't Derek go to the police?" "Because King is the police. His entire precinct is corrupt. They cover for each other, intimidate witnesses, and make problems disappear. King told my son that if he reported the assault, his friends on the force would kill him and make it look like an accident. Based on their history, I believe him." The room was absolutely silent now. "I'm not here to give you orders," Jeremiah continued. "This isn't a Navy operation. This can't be official. What I'm about to propose is outside the chain of command, outside regulations, and if you participate, you do so at your own risk." He paused, letting that sink in. Kurt King's precinct has 28 officers. Most of them are dirty, protecting each other, taking bribes, planting evidence, beating suspects. They operate with impunity because they know the system protects cops. They think they're untouchable. Jeremiah looked at each man in turn. "I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to systematically dismantle that precinct, starting with the worst offenders and working my way up to King himself. I'm going to make them afraid. I'm going to make them quit. And I'm going to make sure they understand that there are consequences for hurting innocent people." He let the silence stretch. "This is completely voluntary. If you want no part of this, walk out now. No judgment, no consequences. But if you stay, understand what you're signing up for. We're going after cops. We're going to operate in the shadows, use everything I've taught you, and we're going to be ghosts. No footage, no witnesses, no mercy. And when we're done, Kurt King and his friends will either be gone or in prison. But either way, they'll never hurt anyone again." Nobody moved. "Last chance," Jeremiah said. "Anyone who wants out, leave now." Not a single man left. Jan Watson raised his hand. "Chief, permission to speak?" "Go ahead." "Most of us became SEALs to protect people who can't protect themselves. We swore an oath to defend against enemies foreign and domestic. Sounds like King and his precinct qualify as domestic enemies." "I'm in." "Me too," said Sean Robinson. "Count me in," added another voice. Within seconds, all 40 men were volunteering. Jeremiah felt something he hadn't felt in years, pride mixed with gratitude. These men didn't owe him anything beyond the training he provided, but they were willing to risk their careers, their freedom, even their lives for a cause they believed in. "Thank you," he said simply. "Here's how this is going to work." He spent the next 2 hours laying out the plan. It was complex, multi-layered, and designed to exploit every weakness in King's network. They'd start with intelligence gathering, identifying which cops were the worst, where they lived, their routines, their vulnerabilities. Then they begin a campaign of psychological warfare, making the officers paranoid, turning them against each other. Some would be approached with evidence of their crimes and given a simple choice: resign immediately or face exposure. Others would find themselves in situations where their corruption was revealed to honest cops or the media. The most dangerous ones, the ones like King who enjoyed hurting people, would receive personal visits that would convince them Phoenix was no longer safe. "We split into teams of 4, Jeremiah explained, using a map of Phoenix spread across a table. Each team gets assigned specific targets. We rotate surveillance, never establishing patterns. We gather evidence, photos, recordings, witnesses. And we use that evidence as leverage. What about King himself? Sean Robinson asked. King is mine, Jeremiah said flatly. But he's also last. We take down his support structure first. Isolate him. Make him feel what it's like to be helpless and afraid. Then, when he's got nobody left to protect him, we finish it. Ira Baird spoke up. Chief, I've got contacts in Phoenix. Former SEALs who retired there, some cops who actually give a damn. I can coordinate intelligence and provide safe houses. Good. Watson, you're my second in command on this. Coordinate the teams. Maintain operational security. Robinson, you're on tech. I want surveillance equipment, encrypted communications, the works. They worked late into the night, refining the plan, identifying resources, preparing for contingencies. By the time they finished, it was past midnight, and every man knew exactly what role he'd play in the coming days. As the operators filed out, Jan Watson lingered. Chief, can I ask you something? Yeah. You really think we can pull this off? 28 cops, and we can't leave any evidence that leads back to us. Jeremiah's smile was cold. Watson, I've spent 22 years teaching men how to infiltrate enemy territory, gather intelligence, and eliminate targets without anyone knowing we were there. These cops aren't Taliban fighters or trained insurgents. They're bullies with badges who've gotten comfortable because nobody's ever challenged them. And if something goes wrong, then it comes back on me, not you. I'll take full responsibility. But nothing's going to go wrong because we're going to do this right. He put a hand on Watson's shoulder. Trust the training. Watson nodded and left. Alone in the briefing room, Jeremiah stared at the map of Phoenix. Somewhere in that city, Kurt King was probably sleeping peacefully, confident that he'd gotten away with beating a kid half to death. Confident that his badge and his corrupt friends made him untouchable. Jeremiah had spent his entire adult life preparing for moments like this. Not just physically, but mentally and morally. He'd killed men in combat, always following rules of engagement, always under authority of lawful orders. This was different. This was personal. This was revenge. But it was also justice. The system had failed Derek. The police couldn't be trusted, the courts would be manipulated, and meanwhile Kurt King would continue terrorizing his family. Sometimes, Jeremiah knew, the only way to stop a predator was to become something more dangerous. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to Mary. Derek's with me. He's safe. Don't contact Kurt. Don't tell anyone where Derek is. I'll explain everything soon. Her response came quickly. What happened? Is he okay? Kurt said Derek ran away. Kurt's lying. I'll call you tomorrow. Right now, just stay safe and act normal. Jeremiah, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. But not of me. I'm going to fix this. He pocketed the phone and headed back to his office, where Derek was sleeping in a cot Potts had set up. His son's face was still swollen and bruised, but his breathing was steady. Jeremiah sat in his desk chair and watched Derek sleep, the way he'd done when Derek was a baby and Jeremiah would come home from deployment. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I chose wrong. But I'm here now, and I swear to you, nobody will ever hurt you again. Derek stirred but didn't wake. Jeremiah pulled out a notebook and began writing down everything he knew about Kurt King. It wasn't much yet, just basics from Derek's story and some information from his contact. But it was a start. By morning, he'd have a complete dossier on King and every officer in that precinct. And by the end of the week, Kurt King's world would be burning down around him. The war had begun, and Jeremiah Quinn didn't lose wars. The first team deployed to Phoenix 36 hours later, traveling in civilian vehicles at staggered intervals. Jan Watson led the advance element, 4 operators whose job was pure reconnaissance. They'd spent the previous day studying everything they could find about the Phoenix Police Department's Precinct 17, where Kurt King worked. The precinct served a rough part of town, dealing primarily with drug crimes, gang activity, and domestic violence. On paper, it was a busy station with a decent clearance rate. But dig deeper, and patterns emerged. A disproportionate number of complaints against officers, a high rate of dropped charges, and a suspicious frequency of accidents befalling people who'd filed complaints. Watson and his team, consisting of Sean Robinson, Randy Salas, and Dwayne Simpson, established their base of operations in a rental house 3 miles from the precinct. The house was owned by one of Ira Baird's contacts, a retired SEAL named Bill French, who'd left Phoenix PD after trying to blow the whistle on corruption and getting run out instead. French met them at the house, a burly man in his 50s with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that had seen too many dirty cops get away with too much. "Welcome to hell," French said, shaking Watson's hand. "Baird told me what you're doing. About damn time someone put King and his crew in their place." "Tell us about them," Watson said, setting up a laptop on the kitchen table. French pulled up a chair. "Kurt King's been with the department for 15 years. Started as a patrol officer, made sergeant 8 years ago. Smart, politically connected, and mean as a rattlesnake. He's got a rep for being tough on crime, but that's just PR. Really, he's tough on anyone who gets in his way." "What kind of crew does he run with?" Robinson asked, already setting up surveillance equipment. "King's tight with about 8 guys in particular. His core group. They cover for each other, sharing whatever schemes they're running. Dan Houston's his number 2, been his partner for years. Then there's Stuart Norris, Andre Roberson, Marvin Weiss, all sergeants or senior officers. Below them are younger cops who either worship King or are terrified of him." "What kind of schemes?" Watson asked. French's expression darkened. "Where do I start? Asset forfeiture abuse. They'll pull over anyone carrying cash and just take it, claim it's drug money. Protection rackets for certain businesses in their territory. Planting evidence when they need an arrest. And beating the hell out of anyone who disrespects them. How have they gotten away with it?" Dwayne Simpson asked. "Because everyone who tries to stop them ends up sorry. I tried going through channels, filed a complaint with Internal Affairs. Next thing I know, I'm being investigated for excessive force on a call where I wasn't even present. They manufactured evidence, intimidated witnesses, the whole 9 yards. My own lawyer advised me to resign rather than fight it." French's jaw clenched. "They're protected from above. King's got dirt on a deputy chief, and that deputy chief makes sure nothing sticks to King or his crew." Watson absorbed this. "We're going to need everything you've got. Files, names, patterns, schedules. Already compiled." French pulled out a thumb drive. 15 years of watching these bastards operate. Every dirty arrest I could document. Every complaint that disappeared. Every victim who was too scared to testify. It's all there. Over the next 12 hours, Watson's team built a comprehensive picture of Precinct 17's corruption. They identified the worst offenders, cross-referenced their shift schedules, located their home addresses. Sean Robinson hacked into the precinct scheduling system. Not difficult, given that most police departments had outdated cybersecurity and downloaded copies of everything. Meanwhile, back at Yuma, Jeremiah was coordinating with the other teams. He divided the 40 SEALs into 10 teams of 4, each with a specific mission. Some would handle surveillance, others would conduct the actual operations. A few would serve as quick reaction forces in case something went wrong. Derek was recovering slowly, his bruises turning from purple to yellow-green. The Dr. Jeremiah had brought and confirmed 3 broken ribs, a fractured ulna in his right arm, and a hairline fracture in his orbital socket. He'd need surgery eventually, but for now, he was stable. "Dak," Derek called from the cot. Jeremiah looked up from his laptop. "Yeah. What's happening? I keep hearing people coming and going." Jeremiah saved his work and walked over to Derek's cot. "We're putting together an operation. Remember those 40 SEALs I mentioned? They all volunteered to help." Derek's good eye widened. "All of them? Every single one? To do what?" "To make sure Kurt never hurts anyone again." Jeremiah pulled up a chair. "Derek, I need to ask you some questions. About Kurt, about the precinct, about anything you've seen or heard." "Okay. Has Kurt ever mentioned specific names of cops he works with?" Derek thought for a moment. "Yeah. Dan Houston. He comes over for dinner sometimes. Kurt always jokes about how they clean up the streets together. There's also a guy named Stuart Norris. Kurt talks about him like he's some kind of enforcer." "Anyone else?" "A bunch of names I've heard, but can't remember. Oh, but there was this one time, about 6 months ago, I overheard Kurt on the phone. He was angry, talking about some guy who was threatening to go to the feds about something. Kurt said they needed to handle it before it became a problem. Did he say what happened? Derek shook his head. But a few weeks later, I saw a news story about a guy who died in police custody at Kurt's precinct. They said he hung himself, but he trailed off. You think it was murder? I don't know. But Kurt seemed really relieved after that. Jeremiah made notes. This matched what Bill French had told Watson's team. King and his crew were willing to kill to protect themselves. One more question, Jeremiah said. When Kurt beat you, did he say anything specific? Any threats? Any plans? Derek's face tightened. He said I was lucky he didn't kill me. He said if I ever told anyone, he'd make Mom disappear and claim she'd run off. He said his friend would back him up, and nobody would ever question it because cops protect their own. Jeremiah's jaw clenched. Kurt King had been confident enough to outline his entire protection scheme to a victim, secure in the knowledge that the system would never hold him accountable. Thank you, Jeremiah said. Get some rest. This'll be over soon. That night, Jan Watson called in his first report. Chief, we've got eyes on 6 targets tonight. King's at home with your ex-wife. He seems calm. No indication he's worried about Derek. Houston and Norris are both working the night shift. We've also identified a weak link, a guy named Ricky Hampton. He's newer to King's crew. Seems nervous. Might be someone we can flip. Good work. Start with the periphery. The guys who aren't King's core group, but benefit from his protection. Let's see if we can get some of them to quit on their own. Roger that. We're moving on our first target tonight. The first target was Officer Carlton Hughes, a 3-year veteran who'd been present at multiple incidents where excessive force complaints had been filed, but never substantiated. According to French's files, Hughes had a cocaine habit and a gambling problem. At 2 a.m., Watson's team entered Hughes's apartment. They'd watched him leave for his shift an hour earlier, and his locks were embarrassingly easy to bypass. Inside, they planted evidence of his drug use in places where it would be discovered during a routine inspection. They also left a single playing card, the Ace of Spades, on his pillow with a message written on it. They know. Resign now, or everyone finds out. The next morning, Hughes called in sick. The morning after that, he submitted his resignation, citing personal reasons. One down. The second target was Officer Justin Holder, who'd been involved in several questionable shootings. Watson's team followed Holder for 3 days, documenting his routine. On the 4th day, Holder got into his car to find an envelope on his dashboard. Inside were photos of him accepting a bribe from a known drug dealer, along with a typed note. You have 48 hours to turn in your badge. After that, these go to the FBI. Holder resigned 2 days later. 2 down. The operations continued over the following week, each one precisely calibrated to the target's vulnerabilities. Some officers were confronted with evidence of their crimes and given a choice. Others found themselves in situations where their corruption was exposed to people who could hurt them. Other cops, criminals they double-crossed, journalists looking for stories. By the end of the 5th day, 8 officers from Precinct 17 had resigned. The precinct commander was scrambling to understand why his personnel were abandoning ship. Some of King's crew were getting nervous. But Jeremiah wasn't satisfied with resignations alone. Some of the cops were too dangerous to simply let walk away. These are the ones who'd get a more direct intervention. Officer Dan Houston, Kurt King's right-hand man and suspected of at least 2 murders, was walking to his car after his shift when 4 men stepped out of the shadows. They moved with military precision, surrounding him before he could react. Don't move, Jan Watson said quietly. Don't scream. Don't reach for your weapon. Houston was a big man, 6'4" and 240 pounds, with a reputation as a brawler. He'd beaten suspects in custody, terrorized witnesses, and once put a defense attorney in the hospital for asking too many questions during a deposition. Who the hell are you? Houston growled, his hand moving toward his gun. Sean Robinson broke Houston's wrist before the officer's fingers touched the holster. The crack of bone echoed in the parking structure, followed by Houston's scream. We said don't reach for your weapon, Watson said calmly. Let's try this again. We're going to have a conversation, and you're going to listen very carefully. Houston clutched his broken wrist, his face pale with pain. You're dead. All of you. I'm a cop. Dwayne Simpson hit Houston in the solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. When Houston doubled over, gasping, Simpson grabbed him by the hair and forced him to look up at Watson. "You're not a cop," Watson said. "You're a criminal with a badge. And we're here to give you a choice. Resign tomorrow, turn yourself in, and confess to every crime you've committed. Or we'll make sure you never work in law enforcement again. And that's the gentle option." "Fuck you," Houston spat. "Wrong answer." What happened over the next 30 minutes was professional and brutal. Watson's team didn't enjoy it. They weren't sadists, but they were efficient. Houston was systematically broken down, both physically and psychologically. They used techniques Jeremiah had taught them. Pressure points, joint manipulation, psychological warfare. Nothing that would kill him, nothing that would leave permanent damage, but everything that would make him understand he was helpless. When they were done, Houston was lying in the fetal position, sobbing. "You have until noon tomorrow," Watson said, standing over him. "Resign and confess, or we come back. And next time, we won't be this gentle. Do you understand?" Houston nodded, unable to speak. "Good. One more thing." Watson crouched down. "If you tell anyone about this, if you try to warn King or anyone else, we'll know. And then every crime you've ever committed gets sent to the FBI, the state attorney general, and every news outlet in Arizona. Your choice." They left Houston in the parking structure, broken and terrified. The next day, Dan Houston turned himself into the FBI, confessing to accepting bribes, falsifying evidence, and assaulting suspects. His testimony implicated 5 other officers, including Stuart Norris. 3 down, multiple others facing investigation. Back in Phoenix, Kurt King was starting to panic. His crew was falling apart. Officers were resigning, others were under investigation, and nobody knew why. He tried to maintain order, to keep his people in line, but the uncertainty was eating at them. "What the hell is going on?" King demanded during an emergency meeting with his remaining loyal officers. Stuart Norris looked around nervously. "Someone's targeting us, Kurt. This isn't random. Someone knows exactly who we are and what we've done." "You think it's the feds?" asked Officer Andre Roberson. "The feds would have raided us, brought charges," King said. "This is something else. This is personal. Could it be one of the families we've dealt with?" Norris suggested. King thought about that. They'd made a lot of enemies over the years, but none of them had the resources or skills to pull off this kind of coordinated campaign. Then he remembered Derek, the kid who'd shown up bloody and threatening to run to his father. The kid Kurt had beaten and warned to stay quiet. What day did Derek Quinn run away? King asked suddenly. Norris checked his phone. 8 days ago. What? 8 days ago. And that's when everything started falling apart. His father, King said slowly. Derek's father is Jeremiah Quinn, former Navy SEAL, now trained SEALs at Yuma Proving Ground. The room went quiet. "You think a SEAL is doing this?" Roberson asked. "Not just a SEAL. A guy who spent 22 years teaching the most elite warriors in the world how to fight. And we beat his son half to death and threatened to kill him." "Christ," Norris breathed. King stood, his mind racing. "Listen to me, all of you. We need to circle the wagons. Nobody talks to anyone outside this room. We watch each other's backs. And we find Quinn before he comes for us." "Ow," Roberson asked. "If he's behind this, he's not going to be easy to find. Then we go after his family," King said. "We bring Mary in, use her as leverage." Norris shook his head. "Kurt, that's your wife. She's a liability. If Quinn's after us, he'll come for her eventually anyway. Better we control the situation." But even as King made plans, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: fear. Real, genuine fear. Because somewhere out there, a warrior who'd spent decades learning how to kill was coming for him, and King had no idea how to stop it. Mary Quinn, now Mary King, sat in her kitchen, staring at her phone. She hadn't heard from Derek in over a week, and Kurt's story about Derek running away felt wrong. She knew her son. He wouldn't just disappear. The text from Jeremiah had been cryptic and disturbing. "Derek's with me. He's safe." What did that mean? Why was Derek with Jeremiah? And why had Jeremiah told her not to contact Kurt? She tried calling Derek's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried calling Jeremiah, but he wasn't answering. All she had were questions and a growing sense of dread. Still nothing? Kurt asked, walking into the kitchen. Mary jumped. She hadn't heard him come in. No, Derek's not answering. Kurt poured himself coffee, his face carefully neutral. I'm sure he's fine. Probably just needs space. You know how kids are at that age. He wouldn't worry me like this. Mary set down her phone. Kurt, what really happened before Derek left? I told you. We had an argument. He got upset and stormed out. Teenage drama. What was the argument about? Kurt's jaw tightened. Does it matter? Yes, it matters. He's my son, and you're my wife. Maybe it's time you decided where your loyalty lies. Mary stared at him, shocked. Are you seriously suggesting I have to choose between you and Derek? I'm suggesting that Derek's been disrespectful and ungrateful. I've tried to be a father to him, and all he does is throw it back in my face. Maybe some time away will teach him some respect. There was something in Kurt's tone that made Mary's skin crawl. Something cold and threatening. She'd noticed changes in Kurt over the past year. Moments of anger that seemed disproportionate, a controlling nature that had become increasingly oppressive. But this was different. This felt dangerous. I think I should go to Yuma, Mary said. Check on Derek. No. Excuse me. Kurt set down his coffee mug with deliberate care. You're not going to Yuma. You're going to stay here, and we're going to present a united front. Derek made his choice. He'll come home when he's ready. Kurt. This discussion is over, Mary. He walked out, leaving Mary alone with her fears. She waited until she heard his car leave. He was heading to work, then immediately called Jeremiah. This time, he answered. Mary. Jeremiah, what's going on? Where's Derek? Why did you tell me not to contact Kurt? There was a long pause. Then, Mary, I need you to listen very carefully. Derek is safe. He's here with me, under medical care. He was badly injured before he came here. Mary's hand flew to her mouth. Injured? How? What happened? Kurt beat him. For 3 hours. Broke bones, destroyed his face. Derek came to me because he was afraid Kurt would kill him. The world tilted. Mary gripped the counter to steady herself. That's no. Kurt wouldn't. He did. And he threatened to kill Derek if Derek told anyone. That's why Derek ran. That's why you can't trust Kurt. Oh my God. Tears were streaming down Mary's face. Is Derek okay? He will be. But Mary, you need to understand something. Kurt is dangerous. He's part of a corrupt network of cops who cover for each other. They intimidate witnesses, plant evidence, maybe worse. And right now, I'm in the process of taking that network apart. What does that mean? It means officers in Kurt's precinct are resigning or being arrested. It means Kurt's crew is falling apart. And it means when this is over, Kurt will be held accountable for what he did to Derek. Mary's mind was reeling. Jeremiah, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. But I need you to do something for me. Act normal around Kurt. Don't let him know we've talked. Don't let him know you suspect anything. Can you do that? I think so. Good. Because Mary, if Kurt realizes you know the truth, you become a threat to him. And I can't protect you if I don't know where you are. Should I leave? Should I come to Yuma? Not yet. If you disappear, Kurt will panic and do something rash. Right now, as long as he thinks you're in the dark, you're safer. But I've got people watching your house. If anything changes, if Kurt does anything threatening, they'll intervene immediately. People watching my house. Jeremiah, what have you done? Why should I have done years ago? I'm protecting my family. After they hung up, Mary sat in her kitchen for a long time, trying to process everything. Her husband had beaten her son. Her husband was corrupt. Her husband was dangerous. And her ex-husband, the man she divorced because he was never there, was now orchestrating some kind of military operation to protect them. She thought back over her marriage to Kurt. The signs had been there, she realized. The way he talked about suspects with such casual cruelty. The times he'd come home with bruised knuckles and a satisfied expression. The stories he'd told about teaching people lessons. She'd ignored it all, rationalized it as the stress of being a cop. But now she understood. Kurt wasn't stressed. This was who he was. Mary began packing a bag, slowly and carefully. If she needed to run, she wanted to be ready. By the 10th day, Precinct 17 was in chaos. 14 officers had resigned. 8 more were hospitalized, some from mysterious accidents, others from altercations that nobody could quite explain. 6 officers had simply disappeared, including Stuart Norris, who'd last been seen leaving his house for his shift and never arrived. The precinct commander had called for state police assistance, suspecting some kind of organized crime attack on his officers. But the state investigators couldn't find any evidence. No witnesses, no footage, no forensic evidence. It was as if ghosts were systematically dismantling the precinct. Kurt King knew better. He knew exactly who was responsible, even if he couldn't prove it. He tried to marshal his remaining loyal officers, but morale was shattered. The ones who weren't already planning their resignations were looking over their shoulders constantly. Nobody trusted anyone. Andre Roberson had been the latest casualty. He'd been found in his apartment, beaten unconscious but alive. When he woke up in the hospital, he refused to say what happened. 2 days later, he resigned and moved to another state. King was down to 6 officers he could truly count on, and even they were wavering. "We need to end this," Officer Marvin Weiss said during an emergency meeting at King's house. "Turn ourselves in, cut a deal, whatever it takes." "Nobody's turning themselves in," King snapped. "We've worked too hard, sacrificed too much." "Sacrificed?" Weiss laughed bitterly. "Kurt, half our crew is gone. The ones who aren't in jail are running scared. Whatever Quinn's doing, it's working. Then we hit him back," King said. "We find his weak points and exploit them." "His weak point is his ex-wife," said Officer Darren Smith. "Your wife." King had thought about that. Mary was the obvious leverage point, but she was also his wife, his alibi, his respectable face. Hurting her would raise questions he couldn't answer. "There has to be another way," King muttered. "Maybe we negotiate," Weiss suggested. "Reach out to Quinn, offer him something." "He doesn't want negotiation. He wants blood." King stood and paced. "We're dealing with someone who spent 2 decades in combat, who trains the most lethal operators in the world. He's not going to stop until we're all destroyed." "Then maybe we should give him what he wants," said another officer, Ricky Hampton. "You, Kurt. He wants you. Maybe if we give you up, he'll leave the rest of us alone." King's hand moved to his gun. "You suggesting I'm expendable, Hampton?" Hampton raised his hands. "I'm suggesting we're all expendable to Quinn. He's picking us off one by one. Maybe if we offer him the person he really wants, he'll call off his dogs." The room fell silent. King could see it in their eyes. They were considering it. His own crew, the men he'd protected and enriched for years, were considering throwing him to the wolves. "Get out," King said quietly. "All of you." "Meeting's over." They filed out, leaving King alone in his house. He walked to his gun safe and checked his weapons. A Glock 19, a Sig Sauer P226, a pump-action shotgun, and an AR-15 he'd confiscated from a drug dealer and never turned in. He loaded each weapon and placed them strategically around the house. If Jeremiah Quinn was coming for him, King would be ready. What King didn't know was that Jeremiah was already there. Watson's team had infiltrated King's house days ago, installing surveillance equipment in every room. They'd watched King's meetings, recorded his conversations, documented his plans. Every word King had spoken about beating Derek, about killing suspects, about corrupting the system, all of it was on tape. And now, Jeremiah had enough evidence to bury Kurt King forever. But evidence wasn't enough. Jeremiah wanted King to feel what Derek had felt. Helpless, terrified, broken. On the 14th night after Derek's arrival, Jeremiah drove to Phoenix. He went alone, against Watson's advice, because this final confrontation had to be personal. He parked 3 blocks from King's house and walked the rest of the way, moving through shadows like he'd done in Fallujah and Kandahar. The house was a modest 2-story in a middle-class neighborhood. Lights were on in the living room. Mary's car was in the driveway, but according to Watson's surveillance, she was visiting a friend. Kurt King was alone. Jeremiah bypassed the alarm system, another outdated piece of technology, and entered through the back door. He moved through the house silently, checking each room. King was in his home office, drinking whiskey and cleaning his service weapon. Jeremiah watched from the doorway for a moment. This was the man who'd beaten his son, who'd broken Derek's bones, destroyed his face, threatened his life. This was the man who'd terrorized Mary, who'd corrupted an entire precinct, who destroyed lives without remorse. "Hello, Kurt," Jeremiah said. King spun, reaching for his gun, but Jeremiah was faster. He crossed the room in 2 strides and disarmed King with a technique that broke 2 of King's fingers. The gun clattered to the floor. King opened his mouth to yell, but Jeremiah's hand clamped over it. "Scream, and I break your jaw," Jeremiah said quietly. "Not if you understand." King nodded, eyes wide with fear. "Good." Jeremiah released him and stepped back. "Sit down." King collapsed into his chair, cradling his broken fingers. Up close, Jeremiah could see the fear in the man's eyes. Kurt King had spent years being the predator, and now he'd become prey. "You know who I am," Jeremiah said. It wasn't a question. "Quinn," King managed. "That's right. Derek's father. The man whose son you beat for 3 hours. The man whose family you threatened to destroy." Jeremiah pulled up a chair and sat across from King. "I want you to understand something. Everything that's happened to your precinct over the past 2 weeks, that was me. Every officer who resigned, everyone who was hospitalized, everyone who disappeared, I made that happen." King's face had gone pale. "You're insane." "No, I'm focused. See, you made a mistake, Kurt. You thought your badge protected you. You thought your corrupt friends made you untouchable. But all you really did was surround yourself with cowards who ran the moment someone pushed back. I'm still a cop. You're a criminal." Jeremiah's voice was ice. "And tomorrow morning, the FBI will receive a complete dossier on your activities. Recorded conversations where you discuss beating suspects, planting evidence, accepting bribes. Testimony from 8 officers who've agreed to testify against you in exchange for reduced sentences. And evidence that you beat a 19-year-old kid nearly to death." King's eyes darted toward the guns he'd placed around the house. "They're gone," Jeremiah said. "My people cleared them out hours ago. You're unarmed, alone, and finished. Mary is safe. She knows everything. By now she's already moved out, filed a restraining order, and given her own statement to the authorities." Jeremiah leaned forward. "You've lost, Kurt. Your career is over. Your crew has abandoned you, and you're going to spend the next 20 years in prison. That's the legal outcome. What's the alternative?" Jeremiah's smile was predatory. "There is no alternative. I'm just here to make sure you understand what's coming. You're going to be arrested tomorrow. You're going to be tried, convicted, and sent to a prison where you'll be surrounded by people you've arrested, beaten, and abused. Guards who've heard about dirty cops. Inmates who know exactly what you are. You can't do this," King whispered. "I already have." Jeremiah stood. "One more thing. If you ever try to contact Derek or Mary again, if you send someone after them, if you even think about revenge, I will come back. And next time, I won't be bound by any laws or rules. Do you understand?" King nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Good." Jeremiah walked to the door, then paused. "You asked Derek if he was a man. You told him he was weak. But Derek did something you never could. He survived what you did to him, and he had the courage to ask for help. That makes him stronger than you'll ever be. He left Kurt King crying in his office, a broken man in a house that no longer offered any protection. The next morning, FBI agents arrested Kurt King on multiple charges: assault, corruption, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. The evidence against him was overwhelming, including recordings of him discussing criminal activity and testimony from former officers. The local news covered the story extensively. Massive corruption scandal rocks Phoenix Police Department. Over the following weeks, additional arrests were made. The deputy chief who protected King was forced to resign. A grand jury investigation was launched. Precinct 17 was effectively dismantled and rebuilt from scratch with new officers, new leadership, and new oversight. 3 weeks after Derek had arrived at Yuma Proving Ground, he sat with his father on the porch of the training facility's medical building. His face was healing, the bruises faded, his broken nose reset. His arm was in a cast that would need to stay on for another month, but the ribs were mending. "How do you feel?" Jeremiah asked. "Better. Physically, anyway." Derek looked at his father. "Dad, what you did, I don't even know how to process it." "You don't have to. Yes, I do. You destroyed an entire police precinct. You terrified dozens of cops. You orchestrated something that sounds like a military operation. I protected my son, Jeremiah said simply. Everything else was just tactics. Derek was quiet for a moment. Mom called me yesterday. She's living with Aunt Sarah now, getting a divorce, seeing a therapist. She says she's sorry she didn't see what Kurt was. She's sorry she let it get so bad. Your mother made mistakes, but she was a victim too. Kurt manipulated her, isolated her. That's what abusers do. She wants to know if I'll forgive her. Will you? Derek thought about it. Yeah, eventually. She didn't beat me, Kurt did. And she's trying to make it right. Jeremiah nodded. That's good. Family's important, Derek. Even when it's complicated. Is that why you did all this? Because we're family. Partly. But also because it was right. Kurt and his crew were predators who'd escaped consequences for too long. Someone needed to stop them. And you decided you were that someone. I was in a position to act, and I had the skills to do it effectively. I don't regret it. Derek looked out at the desert, watching the heat shimmer on the horizon. The other day, one of your students, Watson, I think, told me something. He said you're the most capable person he's ever met, but you're also the most principled. He said you taught them that being a warrior isn't about violence. It's about being willing to stand between the innocent and those who'd hurt them. Watson talks too much, Jeremiah said, but he was smiling. Dad, I've been thinking about my major. Engineering is fine, but I don't know. After everything that happened, I feel like I want to do something more meaningful. Like what? Like maybe following in your footsteps. Joining the Navy, trying for the SEALs. Jeremiah turned to look at his son. Derek, that's a hard life. It costs you things, relationships, time, pieces of yourself. You saw what it cost me. But you also saved lives. You made a difference. And you were there when I needed you most. Derek met his father's eyes. You showed me what it means to be strong, to stand up for what's right even when it's hard. I want to be like that. Jeremiah felt something break open in his chest. Pride, love, hope. If that's what you want, I'll support you. But promise me something. Don't make my mistakes. Don't lose sight of what matters. Being a warrior is important, but being a father, a husband, a son, those things matter too. I promise. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over the desert. 40 Navy SEALs were inside, preparing for tomorrow's training. Kurt King was in jail, awaiting trial. Mary was safe and rebuilding her life. And Derek, broken but healing, was discovering what kind of man he wanted to become. Hey, Dad, Derek said. Yeah, thank you for everything. Jeremiah put his arm around his son's shoulders, careful of the healing ribs. You don't have to thank me. That's what fathers do. We protect our children. We fight for them. And we make sure they know they're loved, even when they're not sure they deserve it. Especially then. The stars were coming out now, brilliant against the darkening sky. Somewhere in Phoenix, lives were being rebuilt. Corrupt cops were facing justice. Victims were finding closure. And in Yuma, a father and son were finding their way back to each other. It wasn't a perfect ending. Those didn't exist in real life. Kurt King's trial would be long and painful. Some of his crew had escaped justice by fleeing the state. Mary would carry scars from her marriage for years. And Derek's physical injuries would heal faster than the emotional ones. But it was enough. Justice had been served. A predator had been stopped. And a family, broken by distance and mistakes, was learning how to be whole again. Jeremiah looked at his son, bruised but unbroken, hurt but healing, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Come on, he said. Let's get you inside. Watson's making dinner, and you need to eat. Doctor's orders. Watson cooks. Not well, but he tries. Fair warning. His chili will strip paint. Derek laughed, and the sound of it, bright and genuine, was the sweetest thing Jeremiah had heard in years. They walked inside together, father and son, warriors in their own ways. And outside, the desert night settled in, vast and eternal, bearing witness to the end of one battle and the beginning of healing. The story had started with violence and pain. It ended with justice and hope. And somewhere in Phoenix, in a jail cell, Kurt King lay awake, finally understanding that actions have consequences, and that some fathers, when pushed far enough, become forces of nature that cannot be stopped, only survived. But Kurt King hadn't survived. Not really. The man he'd been, arrogant, cruel, untouchable, was gone forever. What remained was a hollow shell awaiting punishment, haunted by the knowledge that he'd underestimated the wrong person. And Jeremiah Quinn, the instructor who'd spent 22 years teaching men how to fight, had taught one final lesson. That true strength isn't about dominating others. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. It's about standing up when everyone else sits down. It's about being willing to face the darkness so others can live in the light. That lesson had cost Kurt King everything. And for Derek Quinn, it had given him something invaluable. Proof that his father loved him enough to go to war for him. In the end, that was what mattered most.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.